Masechet Yevamot Daf Samech Zayin. We distinguished yesterday between Nichse Melog, that the wife brings into the marriage, and there the wife retains ownership of it. The husband can benefit from the fruits, from the profits that come from it, but the principal goes back to the wife at the end of the marriage, meaning if it went up in value or it died and has no value, the benefit and the loss is up to her. So Nichse Melog certainly belonged to her, and she takes it back. Nichse Son Barzel, on the other hand, that this Barzel has a fixed value set at the time of marriage, written in the Ketubah. Says this couch is worth $1,000, and at the end of the marriage, she gets $1,000. We saw yesterday machloket in that regard. If she wants the couch back, she wants the actual couch, not the $1,000. And so far we were assuming that, let's say the couch was still worth the same amount as it was before. And she says, listen, I don't want the money in cash, $1,000. I want the couch, which is also worth $1,000. Well, that was a machloket. And the Rav Yehuda says that she is entitled to say, I want the couch, has sentimental value. And since it's equal in value to the assessment from the beginning, so the husband has to give it to her, but that was a machloket. Now Rav Yehuda is going to say one more scenario that clarifies it even further. Let's say she brought into the marriage 2 couches that were together worth 1,000 zuz. And then by the end of the marriage, when they're getting divorced, now they went up in value, and these 2 couches are together worth 2,000. And say again, she wants the actual couches, not the money. So he says, I want to pay you $1,000 and I'm going to keep the couches. She says, listen, you owe me $1,000. Give me one couch is worth $1,000 now, and I will pay you, she says to her husband, another $1,000 for the other couch, and I want the originals. The Rav Yehuda says, yes, she is entitled. She takes one couch as the payment of the ketubah, because that's worth $1,000, the set amount that was assessed, and another she buys with money, and she can take it because this is an honor from her father's house that she remembers, and this is her father gave it to her, and so has sentimental value, and she has a right to it, even though it's nichse melog and it's nichse son barzel and it belongs to him. Nevertheless, she brought it in and intact. If she gives him the value, that's good enough. Okay, we ask, my kamash malan, what is Rav Yehuda adding to us, adding here that we didn't know before? Shevach bet avia didahave, hamara Rav Yehuda hadazimna. In the machloket from yesterday, Rav Yehuda already said that the shevach, the assets, what she brings in from her paternal family, and that sentimental value, that praise, that this shows her how proud she is from something that she got from her father's house. He already said that yesterday, and therefore this is obvious, his ruling that we see now with 2 couches. There is 1 couch, 2 couches. Oh, here's the chidush. I might have thought that when the Rav Yehuda says that she gets to keep what she brought in to the marriage, and if she wants the actual item, that's only to the extent that she is collecting her ketubah. Ketubah says $1,000, so she can take the items, any items she brought in, up to the worth of $1,000. So she can take objects rather than monetary value in payment of her ketubah. But then that's it. So once she gets 1 couch, that her ketubah is paid, and he says, that's it, everything else is mine. I don't have to sell you the other things. That's what I might have thought. So Rav Yehuda comes to teach us this case with when there's 2 items, that yes, she can even come and claim, I want both items back, and I will pay any of the difference. All right, very good. And now we get to the next Mishnah. Bat Yisrael sheniset lekohen vamet. וניחה מעוברת לא יאכלו עבדיה בתרומה מפני חלקו של עובר. Okay, it's a bit complex here. we have a Bat Yisrael, who by herself cannot eat terumah. And she was married to a Kohen, so during that time, obviously, yes, she can eat terumah. And now the Kohen dies. And now remember, if she has children with the Kohen, then she can continue eating forever. If she has no children, she goes back to her father's house, which is Israel, and she can not have terumah. And the same would be true for the Avdei Melog that belonged to her. And if she has a living child, then she eats, and her Avdei Melog also eat. If there are no children, she goes back to her father's house, and Avdei Melog go with her, and they do not eat. But here's the in-between case. She is pregnant. Let's assume for a time being she has no other children. So now she's only pregnant. Does the fetus count as a life here and allow her to have a family with the Kohen, and she can eat, and the Kohen also, and the Avdei Melog also? Or is the fetus not sufficient, and it's like she has no children until it's born? So that's the question, and the answer is Lo yochilu avadeha bitruma. So the fetus is not considered sufficient. We'll see the Gemara will give two explanations. Either it's not considered a Kohen, or it's not sufficiently a life, and therefore she does not eat. Her slaves also do not eat terumah. Not only the Avdei Melog will not eat terumah, because she can't eat and her Avadim cannot eat. The chidush of this phrase is that even the Avdei Son Barzel also cannot eat terumah. The reason is because they were able to eat terumah while the husband was alive, because he owns them. And Avdei Son Barzel is the responsibility and full ownership of the husband. But now that he died, and there's no other heir, there's no sons, or daughters, there's no heirs, and only this fetus is the heir, but the fetus itself is not old enough, the fetus will inherit these Avdei Son Barzel when it's born, but right now as a fetus cannot own them, and therefore does not entitle those Avdei Son Barzel to eat either. So none of the slaves that she brings in can eat terumah. So here's the general rule: Shahaubar posel ve'eno ma'achil debrei Rabbi Yosef. The fetus disqualifies even her mother from eating terumah, and it does not entitle even his slaves, the Avdei Son Barzel, also does not entitle them to eat, and those are the words Divrei Rabbi Yosef. Okay, now the rabbis have a different opinion, and they challenge him, and they say, Amru lo, machal she'adeta lanu al bat Yisrael lekohen, af bat kohen lekohen vamet. So you only told us the case of a bat kohen married to Israel, but your logic regarding Avdei Son Barzel would apply even if it was a bat Kohen married to a Kohen. Now, bat Kohen married to a Kohen, for sure she can continuously eat terumah. She grew up eating terumah, she's married to him, she's terumah, and whether they have children or not makes no difference. Either she's connected to the husband, a deceased husband, and eat terumah, or she's connected to her father's house. She can eat terumah. The Avdei Melog that she owns can continue eating terumah. Yeah, that Rabbi Yosef would agree to. But the question is that regarding the Avdei Son Barzel, and according to your logic, he dies and leaves her pregnant. Lo yochilu avadeha bitruma mipnei chelko shel ubad. So the Avdei Son Barzel, and even if it's Kohen married to a Kohen, should not be able to eat terumah, because who owns these slaves? He is dead. She does not inherit, right? Wives do not inherit husbands in halacha. Rather, it's the fetus that's going to inherit when it's born. But right now, it's not born. And so, the same reason, eno ma'achil, would apply here also. So they ask, how come, Rabbi Yosef, why'd you only talk about a case of Bat Yisrael married to a Kohen? You could even said, anyone married to a Kohen, the nichse Avdei Son Barzel will not be able to eat. And that's it. It's left as a challenge. All right, that's very interesting. Now the Gemara is going to explain the reasoning for them. Ibaya lehu tamad Rabbi Yosef mishum de kasabar ubar bim'e zara zarhu or dilma yalud machil sheno yalud eno machil. So the question was asked, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Yosef, who says that fetus does not entitle the slaves that is going to own the avdeh son barzel that belong to the father, but now the father is deceased, that this fetus does not entitle those slaves to eat terumah? What is his reason? Possibility number one is because he thinks that a fetus in the womb of a non-Kohen woman is also considered a non-Kohen. In other words, the status of a Kohen only applies when it's born. We look, hey, who's the father? Oh, the father's a Kohen. So now this baby, one day old, is considered a Kohen. But while it's a fetus, we say, Ubar yarech immo. In general, there's a question about a fetus. Is it its own being, or is it just part of the mother? It's a limb, part of the mother. And so following that opinion, so since the mother is a Bat Israel, so too all of her body and any fetus inside her is also considered a Yisrael. And therefore, even if you say that a fetus can own something and can inherit these slaves, but right now it has the status of a Yisrael, and therefore cannot eat, the slaves cannot eat terumah. Or do we say a different reason, that it's not because it's a Bat Yisrael, considered a Yisrael. Really, a fetus can be considered a Kohen even as a fetus. The problem is that it's not born. It says only something that's a child that's born can entitle others. If it's not born yet, it just doesn't have the power, it doesn't have the status as a full being to entitle others to eat. And this would be based on a reading of this pasuk, so a Kohen and anyone that's born in his house can eat terumah under him, but it has to be born. If it's not born yet, it's not considered yet being that is powerful enough to eat terumah or to entitle others to be able to eat terumah. Okay, so those are the two possibilities, and both of them are satisfactory explanations in the case of a Bat Yisrael married to Kohen. So we ask, L'may nafkamina, what would be a practical difference between them? And the answer is, L'ubar b'me'eh kohenet. In the second case here, the ones that the rabbis challenged Rabbi Yosef with, where it's a Bat Kohen married to a Kohen, then would the fetus allow the avdeh son barzel to eat? Well, that would make a difference depending on what you pick. If you say that the problem is that it's in a me'eh zara, that the mother is a Bat Yisrael, then if it was a Bat Kohen married to a Kohen, then you wouldn't have this problem. It would be considered a Kohen and would be able to entitle the slaves to eat. So this would fit with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef here, who says only a case of Bat Yisrael. That's where it does not entitle, the fetus does not entitle the Nichse Son Bazel to eat. But if it was a Bat Kohen, then he shows specifically this case. If it was a Bat Kohen, then the fetus is a Kohen and the slaves can eat as well. According to the second reasoning, that it has to do with it being born, well then it makes no difference what the mother is, since it's a fetus, any fetus, no matter what the mother is, cannot entitle others to eat. And so that would be the presumption behind the challenge of the rabbis that said, how come you only talked about a case of Bat Yisrael? Why don't you talk about a Bat Kohen? It won't make a difference. And so this very case will depend on which explanation we choose. So now what is the law? Amar Rabba, Hainu Tamad Rabbi Yosef Kasabaru Babem Ezara Zarhu. Rav Yosef Amar Yelud Ma'achil Shen Yelud Eno Ma'achil. These two possibilities we said anonymously are actually the opinions of Rabba. Explains Rabbi Yosef saying the first reason, that because it goes by the status of the mother. If the mother is Yisrael, the fetus is the Yisrael until it's born, only then it will become a Kohen. And Rabbi Yosef explained it the second way, that any fetus does not have the status yet that can allow others to eat. Okay. Metibet. Now we're going to challenge the second explanation here. Amru lo Rabbi Yosef me'achar she'ha'adeta lanu al bat Yisrael kohen. This is just a braita that is a little bit more elaborate version of the Mishnah. So the rabbis came to the Yosef and said, since you gave us testimony only regarding a case of Bat Yisrael Kohen, Bat Kohen Kohen Mahu, what if it was a Bat Kohen? What would you say in that case? The same question they have. Although over here it's more of a challenge, in the Mishnah it's more of a challenge, and here it's like asking him, what's the law? Malem zo shamati vezo lo shamati. And Rabbi Yosef answered, I have a tradition, I heard a tradition about this case, Bat Yisrael. I never heard a tradition about Bat Kohen, and so that's why I don't teach it. Right? It seems like the tradition is specific, that only in the case of Bat Yisrael, the fetus cannot entitle others, but Bat Kohen, so maybe it would. I just didn't hear a tradition. Okay, now we're going to analyze it. So if we follow the first explanation, that the fetus follows the status of the mother, and the mother is Bat Yisrael, therefore the fetus is also considered Yisrael, then it would make sense why there's any possibility that he would distinguish between the two cases. And he says, I heard a tradition about the case of Bat Yisrael, and there it makes sense to apply. The fetus is not considered a Kohen. I never heard any tradition about the case of Bat Kohen, and there's a good reason to distinguish them, because if it's a Bat Kohen, then maybe the fetus follows the mother, and therefore the fetus is considered a Kohen, and they could eat. So there's very good reason to distinguish between them. But if you follow the second explanation, that it has to be born in order to entitle others to eat. If it's not born, then it doesn't. No matter what it is, no matter who the mother is. Kashya. Then why would he say, I never heard about this, I did hear about this, I didn't hear about that? That's the same exact case. There's no logical reason to distinguish between the two. And so, therefore, this Baraita supports the first explanation, and is a challenge to the second one, Kashya. Good. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shemuel. Zo divrei Rabbi Yosef. So Rav Yehuda is quoting the name of Shemuel, saying this that we learned before up above is the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, which is explicitly says in the Mishnah. It is the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. Aval chachamim omerim yesh lo banim ochlim mishum banim, en lo banim ochlim mishum achim, en lo achim ochlim mishum mishpacha kula. But Shemuel wants to tell us that the sages disagree. And they say, no matter what, in all cases, in all scenarios, Avdeh, Son, Barzel, do eat teruma. He'll go through every case. If the Kohen has living children, actually alive and born, then they are the heirs to these avadim, and they are kohanim, they're sons of kohanim, and so they are slaves that they now inherited can eat teruma. If he has no children, so who's going to inherit? Someone inherits the property. If the kohen has no children, the property goes to the brothers. The brothers are kohanim too, so they can eat. And if he doesn't have any brothers, so it'll go to the father, the uncles, someone in the family, in the male side of the family, will inherit, and there are all by definition kohanim, and so they can eat on behalf of the entire family. And the point of the Chachamim is that we don't consider the fetus anything. We don't even its existence is not yet relevant. It's not owning anything just yet. It's only a fetus. It cannot inherit. And so the slaves are owned by a living Kohen, whoever the heir is. Okay. Zo velo sevir aleh. Now this statement that he said in the name of Shemuel, he said, that is the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. But Chachamim, it sounds like he's saying that is the opinion, but he doesn't agree with it. He's supporting Chachamim against Rabbi Yosef. Is that true? That the Shemuel disagrees with Rabbi Yosef? Remember one time Shemuel told Rav Chana from Baghdad, Pok aite le be'asara. He says, go and get me 10 men. I want a minyan here. Not to pray, but rather as to hear this testimony. Dem alach be'an payu. I want to say this in front of them. When you say halacha l'maaseh, you say it in front of 10 people, then you're saying it in public. Same way when a rabbi would say something in a pirkah, in a public lecture, that became binding. So he wants this to be a public announcement. You need 10 to be a public announcement. 10 represents the whole community. I'm going to say this. Hamzakeh le'ubar kana. Someone who gives a gift to a fetus, the fetus actually does have the power to acquire it, right? It's not a baby gift, it's a fetus gift. If you do that, then it owns it. You can't take it back. It actually owns it. So a fetus can have ownership. So therefore, if we apply that here, since a fetus can have ownership, a fetus can be an heir. If a fetus can be an heir, then that's a problem, because that doesn't work with Chachamim. Chachamim gave all these scenarios. They left out fetus because they assumed a fetus can't be an heir. A fetus cannot own anything. But Shmuel doesn't agree. Shmuel thinks that a fetus can own something, and then that would fit with Rabbi Yosef, who says the fetus is the heir and owns these slaves, but the fetus is not a Kohen, not old enough to entitle others. And so you see that according to Shmuel's reasoning, he should agree with Rabbi Yosef. Ela zo v'sbir aleh. Must be that he says zo. These are the words of Rabbi Yosef, and I agree with Rabbi Yosef. And by the way, there's also another opinion. So my kamash malan. So what's he telling us? De paligi rabanan aleh Rabbi Yosef. He wants to inform us. Oh, listen, Rabbi Yosef says this, and I agree with him. By the way, there is another opinion, and so he tells us what it is. Good. Umi peligi. Hold on. Is there really a machloket here? Does anyone disagree with Rabbi Yosef? Matir Rabbi Zakai. Zo edu ta'it Rabbi Yosef b'nei Shemayav Abtalion. Vehodulo. We have a statement, a baraita from Rabbi Zakai that says one time Rabbi Yosef gave this testimony, right? And he said this the halacha that we said in our Mishnah, and he said, I heard this from Shemaya Naftalion, and they agreed to it. So since it says they agreed to it, it sounds like that is the halacha, and everyone agrees to it, and there's no disagreement. No, it doesn't say kibelu. That's a stronger word that says they accepted it as the only opinion, as halacha. It doesn't say kibelu. So it says they agreed to him, which means they agreed that this is a reasonable, valid opinion. But it doesn't mean that they actually agreed to it as the halacha. They had a different opinion. And so, yes, in fact, there are two opinions here, to Rabbi Yosef and Chachamim, who disagree with them. The Gemara next quotes a rather long baraita. It seems to have three opinions. The first, Rabbi Yosef, who repeats basically what we already know that he said in the Mishnah and the baraita above. And then Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosef. At first, we assume that he is arguing with his father. The Gemara is going to conclude that actually he agrees with his father. He's just saying some extra cases. Rabbi Shimon, and then Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says something new. So we start off, banim ha'elu va'elu ochelim. If you have someone married to a Kohen and he dies and they have sons, so that's a simple case. There, everybody, both types of avadim, avde melog, that's hers, she eats because she has sons from him. And so since she eats teruma, her slaves eat teruma, and also the avde son barzel, those are inherited by the sons, and the sons are kohanim, and so those avadim also eat. Simple. However, if she did not have any sons, and he only left his wife pregnant, then nobody eats. She herself cannot have teruma because she has no sons, and therefore her avdei melog do not eat, and also the avdei son barzel, since the fetus cannot inherit, as the reasons we saw above, so also those avadim cannot eat. But let's say there's both living sons, and she is also pregnant. Avdei melog ochlim. So since the wife herself can eat because she has sons, her avadim, the avdei melog, also can't eat through her. Avdei son barzel lo yochelu. However, his slaves, the son barzel, cannot eat mipnei chelko shel ubar, because although there are living sons who will inherit, the fetus also has a share in the inheritance, and since it is not yet born, it is not yet a kohen, its share in the inheritance, even if there are 10 kids, it's 1/10 cannot eat teruma, and they share the entirety of the inheritance. So therefore, none of those slaves can eat teruma. Shabar posel ve'eno machil divrei Rabbi Yosef. As we saw before, a fetus disqualifies the someone, and also does not disqualifies the mother, and also does not allow others to eat, does not entitle others like the slaves to eat. And that's all Rabbi Yosef, just spelling it out in further detail. Rabbi Shmuel b'Rabbi Yosef omer mishum aviv. Rabbi Shmuel said in the name of Rabbi Yosef's father, Habat ma'achelet haben eno ma'achil. This is a cryptic statement that the Gemara is going to have to struggle with, and says if they have a daughter, presumably that she is pregnant when he dies, and they also have a daughter, and in that case the slaves can eat. But if it's a son, then if it's a son and the ubar, then they cannot eat. So yeah, we understand if she's pregnant, then they cannot eat the ben part. But how come if it's a bat, you would say they can eat? We have to figure that out. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai omer, zecharim yochelu, kulan nekevot lo yochelu, shema yimaseh ubar zachar ve'en lebanot b'mkom haben kilum. Rabbi Rashbi, we'll call him, disagrees. He says if there are living sons, even if the wife is pregnant at the time, the slaves, the avdei son barzel, can eat, because we ignore the fetus. Well, we'll see two reasons. One is we say a sefek sefeka, that fetus, maybe it'll be born a girl, and the girl doesn't inherit anyway, so then the sons are fully inherit, and in any case, maybe it'll be miscarriage. So sefek sefeka, we can ignore the fetus. If there is a living son, then the living son inherits the avdei son barzel, and they can eat. However, if there are only daughters and the wife is pregnant, then you cannot. Now, when there's no sons, the daughters do inherit. So if she wasn't pregnant and there were only daughters, the slaves would be able to eat, because the daughters are bat kohanim, and so they can eat teruma, and they own the avdei son barzel, so they can eat. That's fine. But if the wife is pregnant, their mother, the Kohen's wife, is pregnant, then we say shema yimaseh bar zachar. It might be a boy, and if it's a boy, that boy will inherit, and none of the daughters will inherit. And so in that case, in such a case, the daughters will get nothing, the son will get everything, but the son is not born yet, and therefore is not yet old enough to be ma'achil, the avdei, the avadim that he will inherit. Okay, so that makes sense. Now, we're going to analyze the Baraita in backwards order. Starting with Rashbi. How come he only worries that maybe the ubad, it will be a son, and then the son will inherit? Even let's say there's only daughters, and even if the fetus is a girl, it will also be a problem, because that girl will inherit along with her sisters, and if there are 10 sisters, this fetus will own 1/10, and it's not born yet. Its share in the slaves cannot eat, so none of the slaves can eat. So either way, whether it's a boy or a girl, should be a problem. How come we're only worried maybe it's a boy? And we say, you're right. Chada ve'od kamar. We actually meant two reasons. We just didn't mention both of them. Number one, if the fetus is a girl. There's only girls, and the fetus, if it's a girl, then that share of the girl's inheritance will not be able to eat, so then none of the slaves can eat. Or maybe it'll be a boy, and then it'll be even a worse situation in terms of those slaves eating, because then those living girls get nothing, and the son inherits, and the son is a fetus right now, so the fetus cannot entitle the slaves to eat. All right, now we'll analyze the other case of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, when he says zecharim yochelu. If there are living sons, then even if the wife is pregnant, they can eat. The slaves can eat. How come we don't worry about this fetus? And the fetus is going to, if it's a boy, it will inherit, and then its share of the inheritance cannot eat. Why don't we say what the Yosef said? That's not allowed. How come Rashbi permits it in this case? So one first explanation is that he doesn't worry about the minority of cases. What's the problem? If first of all, it might be a girl, and so if there's living boys, the boys will all inherit. The girl will not inherit if the fetus is a girl. We don't have to worry about that. And even if it's a boy, maybe it won't survive. Maybe it'll be maybe it'll be a miscarriage. And so therefore, sefek, we don't have to worry about the fetus, and so they're living sons. Living sons are heirs, and their slaves can eat. Or another answer. Kerav Nachman Amar Shemuel. Maybe, in fact, we do worry about maybe it's a boy and it will survive. That is something we have to be concerned about. But we can always make an arrangement, a type of arrangement of Nachman said in the name of Shemuel, who said that you can allocate money in for a minor, and he would say that also for a fetus. In other words, the idea is we would, there's all these, there's a lot of the inheritances, these slaves and land and lots of other things. What we can do is we can say, listen, all the slaves, these Avdeh Son Barzel, will go to the living sons, to the born sons, and then the one that's a fetus will give it an equivalent amount in couches. And so that way, the slaves are fully owned by the sons that are born, and so we can make an arrangement like that. We have a case. Well, this is not a fetus, but let's say you have adult children and orphans and adult children and children who are orphans. They all lost their father. The minors are not yet old enough to be able to decide, we'll take this, you take that. But but if they want to come and they do want to split the inheritance, they don't want to wait till the little kid grows up to have to split the inheritance. So the Bet Din will appoint for them an apotropos, a custodian, who will work in their interest, and he will choose a nice portion for them. He will look out for their best interest, and then that's it. So they split it. Now, when they grow up, they could say, "Hey, that was never fair. We want to redistribute." That's the first opinion. But Rav Nachman Dideh Amar. That's Rav Nachman, the name of Shemuel. Rav Nachman himself, however, says, Amar Higdilu en Yecholim Limchot. When they grow up, they cannot object. Because if they can object when they grow up, then the split is not really split. All the other older sons have to always worry. Oh, when they grow up, we're gonna have to give this back now. So then the Bet Din didn't really do anything if it's only temporary, and they can always object. Okay. Either way, you see that they can make a split that will be binding, whether it's fully binding and they can object or not, is a machlok between Shemuel and Rav Nachman. But the point is, they can make an arrangement and they will split the inheritance even while the fetus, before the fetus is born, and the Avdeh, the slaves, will all go to the born sons. And there you go. This could explain Rashbi. Now, Lemad Rav Nachman Tanaehi. So now, is this to say that the machloket between the Rabbi Yosef and Rashbi maybe is parallel to this machloket of Rav Nachman, whether you can do this type of split or not, as such that Rav Nachman would follow Rashbi, who says you can make such a split, and therefore all the slaves can go to the born sons, and Rabbi Yosef, who was stringent this whole time, he says, no, you cannot make such a split. It's not binding, and the fetus will have a share in those slaves until it grows up. And so maybe the two machalokot are parallel to each other, and we say lo dekol ama it lehud Rav Nachman. No, in fact, everybody agrees that you can make a binding split. But this is a case where they didn't do that. And in fact, they're arguing on whether we worry about that minority possibility. Rashbi said, maybe it's a girl, maybe it will be a miscarriage, so we don't have to take into account the fetus. Whereas Rabbi Yosef said, it might be a boy and it might live, and we do have to take into account the minority possibility, and therefore that fetus may very well inherit, and so the slaves cannot eat. Okay, good. And now we get to the previous section of the Braita, the middle portion, which was Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yosef, who said, Omer Mishum Aviv, and he said in the name of his father. It says so explicitly. So really there makes sense that he would agree with his father. Anyway, we have this cryptic statement, Habat machil, haben eno machil. If they have a daughter, the slaves can eat. If they have a son, the slaves cannot eat, assuming she's pregnant. Maishana ben de la machil. When if there's a son, the slaves cannot eat. Mishum chelko shelubad, because the fetus will share in the inheritance, and the fetus is not old enough yet to entitle the slaves to eat. But name lo tachil, so a daughter would be the same thing. Mipnei chelko shelubad. There's a fetus, and the fetus will inherit, and that part of and cannot yet entitle the slaves to eat. So it's the same problem. What would be the difference between bat and ben? Amad Abaye has a brilliant answer. Hacha b'nechasim mu'atim askinan u'chugon te'ika ben behade bat. Abaye says maybe where it's talking about where the inheritance is meager. If there's a big inheritance, then the law is the sons inherit everything, but there's a built-in clause to the ketubah. This clause is so important that even if you don't write it, it still applies. And that says that after the death of the husband, the sons will inherit, but the daughters get to be fed and provided for from the inheritance until they grow up. Right? We don't want to leave the daughters that are the kids starving or begging. And so therefore, the sons have to make sure that they take from their inheritance and they pay for the needs of their sisters when they are young. Now, that's if there's a lot of money. If there's insufficient funds to go to both, then the girls take priority. The sons don't get the inheritance, and the girls get the property so that they can live. And the sons, they'll have to go figure something else out, go begging, find a job, whatever. And so this could be a case where there is in fact not only a daughter but also a son. Which didn't say, but okay, a daughter and a son, and there's insufficient funds, and therefore, when there are daughters, the slaves, those nichse son barzel, can eat, because manavshach, no matter what the situation, they'll be able to eat. If the fetus is a son, is a boy, then that fetus doesn't get any more rights than the son that is already born. And we already said that the son takes a backseat, right, because of insufficient funds. And the daughter gets all the money. And so if the living son doesn't get it, certainly the fetus boy gets nothing. So the slaves are fully owned by the daughter. And if the fetus is going to be a girl, amay achla betakantad rabanan. And so if it's a girl, so then it'll be another girl, another sister. And so why do we say the girls eat before the boys if there's insufficient funds? This was just an enactment midrabanan. So when the rabbis made this drabanan enactment, they only made it for girls that have already come into the world, that already were born. But if they didn't come into the world, the rabbis did not give them the right to take from the boys. In other words, if he died while she's pregnant and there were only boys, the boys would inherit, and that unborn girl would not. And so this whole takana only applies to the living and not to the not yet born, and therefore this fetus, if it's a girl, also will not inherit, will not get any of the money. And so whether it's a boy or a girl, that fetus is not inheriting, is not going to have any ownership of the slaves, and therefore when there is a girl and a boy and insufficient funds, then we don't care. Then the fetus gets no share, and that's what Rabbi Ishmael was talking about. The son of Rabbi Yosef was talking about. Okay, so that's a lot to pack in. Where we reject that. Now you said this whole thing is regarding insufficient funds. But look at the next case, the whole baraita. We're assuming that the whole baraita has to be about the same case. So look at the next statement by Rashbi, who says, Shema yimasehu bar zachar, ben lebanot mkom ben kelum. He said, we have to worry that maybe the fetus will be a boy, and then the girls, living girls, will not get anything because this boy will get everything. That was within the opinion of Rashbi. And so if there's insufficient funds, that's not true. No, it doesn't matter if it's a boy, the girls will get everything. So now the Braita is not consistent. The Sefer is certainly not talking about insufficient funds. So we answer, that's no problem. Could be that The end of the Braita, Rashbi's opinion, is when there's a lot of funds, whereas Rabbi Ishmael is talking about when there's insufficient funds. Okay, so that definitely could be. But now we ask on this explanation of Abaye a more fundamental question. Is this true that when there's insufficient funds, it goes directly to the girls? It doesn't go directly. It has to go still through the boys. As we see, Rabbi Yochanan says, when there are insufficient funds to take care of everyone, and then in that case, you're right, it should go to the girls. But if the boys, the boy orphans, go ahead before the girls to get a chance to take the money, they go and sell everything, right? Shotgun, right? Right after the funeral, they go and sell everything. Even if there's insufficient funds, what's sold is sold, and the boys get the money and not the girls. So you see that even though it's true that the girls must be fed from the estate, essentially the estate does still first go to the boys, and only then they have to give the entirety over to the girls for their sustenance. And therefore this scenario will not help, because when the father dies, those slaves do go to the sons first, and to a possible fetus boy also will go to them, and only to the girl, to the daughter, as secondarily. So this is not sufficient to explain that statement of Bishmael. And final answer, which is a bit forced, is that when it says bat, if there is a daughter, it's not talking about the daughter of the Kohen and his wife, but rather the bat is referring to the wife herself, the mother of the fetus and of the other and the other children. Why is it calling her bat is a bit strange. Well, it does say she's called Bat Yisrael, so she is the wife, but she also is the daughter of someone. So that's referring to her, and it's saying that that her slaves, the Avdei Melog, can eat, because she can eat, and therefore her slaves can eat. Okay, wait a second. If that's the case, and it's telling you that Avdei Melog can eat, and Avdei Son Barzel, when it says son, that's the Avdei Son Barzel that it gets inherited by the son, cannot eat. Well, if that's all it's saying, that's the same as Rabbi Yosef. And the Gemara concludes, and yeah, we're totally fine with that. Kula Rabbi Ishmael, but Rabbi Yosef katani la. In fact, the entire first two sections of the Braita until Rashbi is all taught by Rabbi Ishmael in the name of his father. And so that makes all sense that the entire thing should in fact be Rabbi Yosef. He's just adding some extra formulation as further explanation. We'll leave the next Mishnah until tomorrow. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen v'amen.